welcome to this week's Wildlife Weekly Roundup, a review of the very best of what we've been seeing this week in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. I'm your host, Tenley Thompson, and we've got some great video to share with you all this week. What's going to happen is we're going to show you all sorts of amazing things our guides have been seeing throughout the week. Then there's going to be a chance to win a gift card to our online store with a trivia question, as well as an answer to last week's trivia question. And finally, I'll be answering your questions live about anything about the natural world at the very end. So if you've got questions for me, you can start typing them in the comments below. Our big news this week, as always, because it's spring, is grizzly bears. And we've got some fantastic views of grizzly bear 399. So let's go ahead and start with her because she's a big fan favorite.
Hey everyone, it's Kelsey again, and today I am here to talk to you about all this amazing footage we've been getting of Grand Teton's most famous grizzly bear, Grizzly 399. This spring, she emerged from her den with 4 cubs in tow, which is really impressive considering 399 is 24 years old. These 4 cubs are her largest litter yet. Now, in these videos that we've managed to capture, you can see Mama and the cubs happily munching away on a variety of different food sources. When bears first emerge from their dens in the spring, they are primarily sustaining themselves off of all that new spring vegetative growth, the new grasses and forbs, as well as roots and tubers of a bunch of different plants. These are all very nutrient dense and they provide a great food source. When calving season begins for our elk or deer or moose, which is typically around mid-May to early June, bears will transition to hunting calves. One little tidbit about bears that I love to share with my guests is this really cool thing that they do called delayed implantation. Bear mating season occurs anywhere from mid-May to early July, and when the bears mate, the eggs are fertilized within the female and they then remain in a dormant phase, free-floating in her uterus until just before hibernation begins. When she's ready to hibernate, the eggs will then implant into her uterus and she will be pregnant for only 6 to 8 weeks, napping happily that entire time. When the cubs are born, they are teeny tiny and quite helpless, and they will nurse off of her while she sleeps throughout the rest of winter. And then when spring arrives and the bears emerge from their dens, the cubs are about 12 pounds and they're able to keep up with Mom pretty well. After that, they'll stay with her from 2 to 3 years and learn everything that she is able to teach them. Now, 4 cubs is a lot for a bear to raise. Incredibly rare, but if there's any bear that we believe in to handle this task, it's 399. She's a great mama, which we've been able to see firsthand by the side of the road on our tours.
Thanks, Kelsey. It's been so great to see 399 and those quadruplets doing really well, particularly the little runt, who has more of a little bit of a white face, who I've been a little bit worried about over the last couple of weeks, but he seems to be gaining lots of weight at last. So keep your fingers crossed that those guys stay safe and strong throughout the summer and into the hibernation period. So tell us a little bit about where you're contacting us from. Where are you watching this video? Have you been to Jackson Hole before? What was your favorite experience when you came to the valley? Is there something you'd recommend to other folks who are visiting? Tell us about that in the comment section. We'd love to hear where you're coming from. I think we had some folks from Brazil last week, which made me really, really excited. But if you're coming from even just Jackson Hole, Wyoming, we'd love to know a little bit about you and where you're watching from. So thanks for that. Now, this has really been the week of baby animals. Lots and lots of our hoofed mammals, sometimes called ungulates, are having their offspring and their young this week. I went ahead and took a look around with lots of our other guides to see what we could see. So we're going to start this week's news of hoofed mammals with our elk population. Many of the females in Grand Teton National Park and the surrounding areas gave birth to their calves this week. and they try to all give birth at the same time. Elk actually put out a pheromone that induces labor in the other females of the herd. The idea being, if all of the calves are born within a 48-hour period or so, they overwhelm the local predators who can only catch so many young, vulnerable animals. And so the vast majority of these calves will survive to go ahead and make their way up into the higher country, which is going on right now. A lot of these females are still in the nursery grounds, but some are actually moving up into higher altitudes where there's more green growth and the grass is really starting to green up, and there's more safety on those slopes from predation. So we're still seeing elk down in the traditional nursery grounds that they've been using for thousands of years, where they give birth to these calves, but we're also seeing elk starting to move up into the high country where a lot of the bulls are currently located. Now, bulls and cow elk do not hang out together in the summertime. The bulls feel that those elk calves are far too attractive to predators, and so they do separate themselves out. And we're going to continue to keep an eye on them as they start to grow a little older. They start to lose those little spots which they use for camouflage, and they start to thrive in the valley. To Mike, Kelsey, and Mark, who got all that great elk footage for us this week. Kelsey got a great view of a pronghorn this week. Not quite sure what this pronghorn is eating, but they are thriving as well, and we're beginning to see the first newborns amongst the pronghorn who give birth to twins. Next, we have some really great views of a mother moose and her newborn calf, probably about a week old, taken by naturalist Josh Metton. These two were hanging out together in the cooler weather, enjoying that. It's very easy for moose to overheat in the summer, anything above 70 degrees, and they can actually be at risk of heat exhaustion. So this little calf and her mother were quite happy that we had some cooler temperatures this week, and were doing quite fine in the grass. We also got a view of about a week-old moose calf from naturalist Maddie this week. Look at this cute little face. So adorable. So this little guy was in a thicker brush area right near the river bottoms. Moose prefer riparian lakeside streamside habitat where there's a lot of willow growth to feed mom, so that this calf has plenty of milk to nurse with. So thanks, Maddie, very much for this really adorable footage of this moose calf. Our naturalist Josh also got some views of bison this week up in Yellowstone National Park. This bull bison is surrounded by brown-headed cowbirds, and I got a few brief glimpse views of some bighorn sheep this week, which are pretty far up in the high country. So this was a long view with a spotting scope, which is why it's a little bit fuzzy, but you can see they're starting to lose their winter coats. They're looking a little bit raggedy up there as they're grazing on those first green grasses up in the high altitudes. So that's what we've got to report from the ungulate, the hoofed mammal of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem this week. All right, so a really big thank you to our EcoTour guides, Mark, Mike, Kelsey, Josh, Maddie. All of them contributed to some video in that program. Most of that video was taken while we were actually out on trips with guests this week. So you can see there's a lot going on in the baby animal environment. If you've never come to see us in June, it's an amazing time of year with the baby animals and the wildflowers, which more on that in a little bit, but definitely come on out to Jackson Hole and see it. It's pretty darn spectacular. So let's head up to Yellowstone National Park and see some cool swallow footage from EcoTour owner Taylor.
Here we are, Hayden Valley, cliff swallows. This is just remarkable. Their nest is right underneath the bridge, and these birds are coming out by the thousands to find insects that are hatching off of the water.
I'm sorry to get attacked already, so we can... Don't play the rock right now because your dad's doing a video.
How awesome was that? pretty neat to see these nesting swallows this type of year. We have 3 different species of swallow. If you live here in Jackson, a great place to see them is right by the Dairy Queen, believe it or not. It really is a fantastic place to go right under that bridge and see those nesting swallows for yourself. We've got an update on our nesting birds from an EcoTour Wildlife Wednesday Roundup favorite, Mark, this week. He found some amazing footage of red-tailed hawks and hummingbird eggs, for those of you guys that are just joining us this week. And he's got an update for us, as well as some great bear behavior as well. So let's check in with him.
Hi folks, another really exciting week in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Earlier this week, I was up in Yellowstone and I was able to come across 2 very well-fed subadult bears going to town on some of the new vegetative growth up there in one of the meadows, kind of near the northern part of the lower loop of the Yellowstone road system there. And it was a fantastic viewing watching them forage on some of the grasses that were coming up. Later that same day, I came across a totally different black bear that was swimming one of the side channels of Yellowstone Lake. And anytime you get to see a bear swim is always a treat. But you know, for those of you who might not be aware, bears are incredibly good swimmers. They're very agile in the water, and they can cover great distances and swim with pretty impressive speed across some of those waterways. So it was really neat to see this bear traverse across one of the side channels of Yellowstone Lake. A lot of fun to see. The other exciting news is that the 3 red-tailed hawklets are doing quite well. They're growing fast. The parents are in high gear right now, bringing back a steady diet of Uinta ground squirrels, also known as chislers. And those little hawklets are really starting to show some signs of maturity as their feathers continue to grow and their appetites are quite voracious. The third piece of exciting news is that this week, just recently, the hummingbird eggs hatched. Last week, I was able to put eyes on a hummingbird nest for only the 2nd time in my life, and as of yesterday, I witnessed the first feeding of the young. And one of the things that's remarkable about hummingbirds' ability to deliver their food back at their nest is they use their little needle-like bills as almost like hypodermic needles. And the adults, the female in this particular case of this broad-tailed hummingbird nest, comes back to the nest and it literally injects that needle down into the throat of those nestlings that are down in there. Now, I wasn't able to see down into the nest to get a count on how many young ones there are, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on them over the next couple of weeks, because getting close to the first week or so of July, those young ones will be ready to fledge out of that nest. So hopefully at some point we'll get an accurate count on how many baby hummingbirds there are. But you know, pretty exciting week in the GYE here in the Jackson Hole area. You know, a lot of fun stuff going on. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Mark. Always good to see the update on those red-tailed hawks, and I'm really excited to see that those hummingbirds have hatched. For those of you who have not been tuning in with us every week, you have to understand that hummingbird nest is about that big that he's filming. So it's really, really neat to see. I personally have never seen a hummingbird nest in action, so I've been having a great time seeing these videos as they come in of those little itty bitty little baby hummingbirds. Pretty awesome stuff. Now, my good friend Laura, who's an amazing biologist, has a great fondness for Harlequin ducks, and I thought I was the only one. So let's check in with her and find out why they're so great.
Hi, this is Laura. Today I'm going to talk to you about Harlequin ducks, which is one of my favorite ducks in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. This week I had a chance to view Harlequin ducks along the Yellowstone River. And Harlequins prefer to be in fast, turbulent water, think like rapids. And to me, they're almost like the whitewater kayakers of the duck world. The Harlequins will swim down underneath the water to eat things like black fly larvae, sometimes stonefly larvae off the rocks underneath the water, and also things like small fish and crustaceans. Here in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, we do have crawfish in some areas, which a harlequin would love to eat. Harlequins are a migratory duck, so they fly over to the rocky coastline in the Pacific Northwest for the winter season. Off the coast of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, harlequins find those really turbulent areas where the waves are just crashing up against the rocks, and they'll similarly dive down underneath the salt water to capture things like crustaceans and small fish throughout the winter season to feed themselves.
If you ever get a chance to get up to Yellowstone and see Harlequin ducks, or if you're from the Pacific Northwest, do let us know. Send us some of your videos. We'd love to see what you're seeing out there as well. And don't forget, if you're enjoying this, please do share it with your friends. The more of an audience we can reach every week, the bigger we can make this video program. So it's been really fun to see where everybody's visiting. Well, it's a couch vacation. Sure, you're visiting, right? Where everybody is watching from. But it's also been really fantastic to see how these videos have grown over the last couple of weeks. So thanks so much for tuning in. Now, I wanted to get in on the action as well, and I was particularly interested in going out and seeing our wildflowers. Some of you may not know this, but I'm a really big dork. I looked up the blooming average of my favorite wildflower, arrowleaf balsamroot. I averaged out the dates, and I got married on the average date. And because arrowleaf balsamroot is in full bloom, we had a fantastic video by Taylor last week about that, I wanted to go check it out. Along the way, I couldn't help finding a lot of other neat things that are going on in the ecosystem, large and small. My efforts to find wildflowers this week, I found a lot of other things, including red-winged blackbirds, who have a great call. These guys were in the marshy, swampy areas just outside the National Elk Refuge. And then, while I was looking for these guys, I actually ran into a bird I don't see as often, which is the pine siskin. I was pretty excited. You can see these guys have these cute little yellow wings and a real perky, beautiful call. I also ran into this female and male cinnamon teal duck who clearly were nesting in the long reeds and grasses outside the elk refuge. Kelsey and I were both fortunate enough this week to get some views of long-billed curlews, one of my favorite birds in Grand Teton National Park. Only recently they've been found to be nesting in the national park, and this very rare western bird seems to be on the strong road to recovery. I couldn't be gladder to hear it. I also ran into this lovely bald eagle up on a power line. Based on its size, I'd argue it's likely a full adult female, but it wasn't telling me. Out on the elk refuge, I got a great view of this nesting trumpeter swan. There are only 2 types of swan in North America, and the trumpeter swan is by far away the rarest and the largest. This was one of the first areas of recovery of trumpeter swans starting in the 1960s and 70s, and we're very lucky to have a very stable population of trumpeter swans on the National Elk Refuge today. Big birds aren't the only thing I saw while looking for wildflowers. There's lots of insect activity too. This ant colony was quite busy feeding the young pupa and young with all the fresh green grasses, plants, and pollen that were out and about. These guys were in a dandelion, which is something I'd never seen before. I also got a great view of a honeybee harvesting pollen from flowers. Honeybees, of course, are not native to North America, but are critical for our domestic agriculture. Lastly, I really did get some good views of wildflowers. Lupine and arrowleaf balsamroot are still in abundance. In addition, sticky geranium was out. I saw some scarlet gilia. Also a yellow warbler, a very unusual and rare bird, and something I don't get a chance to see very often. Listen to its call. So that was a pretty fun outing. And the long-billed curlew is something that we've been seeing more and more of every year. I had an ornithology professor in college who felt very, very strongly that long-billed curlews would recover in the United States. And this was quite a long time ago. Let's not say quite how long ago it was. He also felt very, very strongly that Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks would be the epicenter of that recovery. I remembered hearing this in college, and then I moved out here to pursue wildlife research, and I never quite forgot what he told me. And so a couple years ago, when I saw those long-billed curlews begin to nest, I thought to myself, now there is a man who knew everything about birds. And sure enough, every year we're seeing just a few more of them. But to see one on any trip is a real treat. So that was a pretty fun, great situation that I found myself in with guests this week. In the meantime, EcoTour's naturalist had a great view of a fox. Let's check it out. So this is a young fox. It certainly wasn't born this year, but it still has sort of a juvenile look to it. So Maddie and I think it was probably born last year, so newly off on its own, and it was mousing in this open field. When Josh stopped by, it was very, very curious about him, so it immediately sort of stopped doing what it was doing. If you ever seen a mousing fox, they jump straight up in the air and then pop back down. But those curious ears made it clear that he didn't have a tremendous amount of experience with people and is certainly pretty used to seeing cars go by, but not one stop and keep a look at him. So this was pretty funny for Maddie to see. So that's pretty fun. Now we've got one more great wildlife video for you, and then we're going to talk about some other great things that are going on this week, and then we've got our trivia question, and then don't forget, I'll be answering your questions live at the end of our broadcast. So if you've got some good questions about the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, Grand Teton, Yellowstone, things you saw today, places to go find animals, do let me know in the comment section, and I'll see if I can get to those questions at the end, and we'll go from there. Now, a big favorite on these programs is our naturalist and biologist, EcoTour guide Verlin. And he found a very unusual skull in a very unusual place.
Hey guys, out here exploring this burn today, mostly looking for wildflowers and mushrooms. We stumbled across a carcass, old carcass I should say, a skeleton, not really a carcass, there's nothing but bone left here. But what is interesting, so we're in this really heavily forested area here in the Gros Ventres. This is a pronghorn skull, and pronghorn, as many of you may know, are not really adapted for these forested environments. They're more comfortable out in the plains where they can see with these great big eyes. What I think might have happened here, you know, this is a major migration corridor coming in and out from summer to winter range. You know, pronghorn really are, I guess, the most susceptible to predation and most vulnerable when they are going through these areas they're not comfortable in. And maybe something bad happened to her, who knows? But when we look at this, we know it's a pronghorn skull, not a deer skull. It's very long and narrow, and we also have little horn spurs on the skull itself. But really what's unique about this versus a deer skull is these orbitals on the skull. These ones are kind of off to the side, whereas a deer would be squared up a little bit more, facing more so centered, or forward, I'm sorry. And they wouldn't be quite as large in comparison to the skull either. Pronghorn have incredible sense of vision, and they can see, you know, about 320 degrees field of view, hence why those eyes are situated right on the side of the head, not pointed more forward like a deer or an elk would be. Really cool, kind of weird place to find this. This is not a place I would expect a pronghorn to be.
Thanks, Verlin. So as part of our video program on Facebook and Instagram, and you can catch us on YouTube as well, we like to work with local nonprofits and wildlife organizations to provide educational experiences for folks both near and far. We've got another one of those special experiences coming up. In fact, if you'll join us this coming Friday, June 19th, at 11 a.m. on Facebook, we're going to go ahead and do a program with the Teton Raptor Center talking about bald eagles, their habitat, their ecology, things that you can do to help them as a species with some live eagles. As part of the program, you're going to get a chance to see some of these eagles live. It's going to be really, really an incredible experience. Don't miss it. This Friday, 11 a.m., June 19th, should be really, really a fun event. Now you can catch that, like all of our videos, here on our Facebook page, Jackson Hole EcoTour Adventures. You can also check it out on our Instagram, at JH EcoTours, and on our YouTube channel as well. We try to broadcast it on all sorts of things to get as many eyeballs as we can. So don't miss that on Friday. So we've got a trivia question for you. Then I'll be answering your questions live. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, to share it with your friends so that we can broaden our reach and more folks get an opportunity to see some of the great things that are going on out here in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And if this was fun, you can always join us every Wednesday at 5:30 for that week's local sightings by all of our guides and naturalists. Okay. Last week's trivia question I thought was pretty easy, but I think some folks had some trouble with it. So this isn't this week's, this is last week's trivia question. My question was, what is the name of this animal? And I wanted the proper name of the animal, not the short name. And I heard a lot of people tell me that this was a mountain goat. This is not a mountain goat. Mountain goats are white. And then I heard a lot of people say that it was a mountain sheep, which is something my mother calls them. They are not. I can see why you'd get the two mixed up. This is a bighorn sheep. This is a bighorn sheep ram, a male bighorn sheep. So for those of you guys who got last week's trivia question correct, congratulations. Well done. We'll see if we can't stump you this week. Now, the way this is going to work is all you have to do for this week's question is comment the answer to the question in the comments section, and then we're going to choose one person at random from the correct answers to win a $10 gift card at our EcoTour Adventures online store. We started this store as part of the COVID closure when we weren't able to operate to fully fund our employees' health insurance and health plans. And so all the proceeds from the EcoTour online store, which includes Steel logo wear, gifts, art, all sorts of really awesome stuff, is going towards funding our health insurance. So we really, really appreciate your support. This week's featured item is a Thomas D. Mangelson print of $3.99, the first thing we saw this time with her last set of cubs, her last set of triplet cubs. Remember, she's got quadruplets at the moment. This is her triplets that she had. If you'd like to have a little bit of a piece of $3.99 in your own home, then you can go ahead and head on over to our online store and pick that up. And big thanks to Thomas D. Mangelson for supporting the employees of EcoTour Adventures. We've spent a lot of time in the field with him. He's a great guy, and we really appreciate his support. So this week's question, are you ready? Tell me the name of this animal. Anybody know what this one is? Go ahead and comment in the comment section. Locals call this a rock chuck. And when I was growing up, I thought that was the name of the animal. Give me the actual proper American title for this animal. I'll give you some more hints. There's a clothing brand named after this animal. It's a rodent. We're famous here in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem for a melanistic, a black form of this animal, but its name includes a color of its belly. Okay, I don't want to give any more hints or I'm going to give it away, but go ahead and tell me in the comment section if you know what the name of that animal is, and we'll see how many of you all get it right. Feel free to tune in next week. We'll talk a little bit about that animal. I almost said the name. I almost let it slip. And a whole lot more. We've got lots of exciting footage coming in. A couple of things that were taken today that we couldn't quite make onto the broadcast, including a pronghorn antelope giving birth. So if you'd like to see that, that's pretty amazing. We've got some more grizzly bear footage that was taken just today that I couldn't quite get done on time. It was taken at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was just a little bit too late for me to get it into this broadcast today. Check out all of that and more next Wednesday at 5:30. Okay, so now the fun part of this. go ahead and tell us where you're visiting from. Don't forget to share the video. And if you've got questions for me, I'm here to answer them live. So I'm gonna pick up my iPad here and I'm gonna see if I can't give you guys some answers to the questions you've been writing. So bear with me while I look at them and see if we've got anything. Ooh, lots of right answers for the trivia question. Well done, guys. Excellent, excellent. I see some familiar names in there too. My sister got the answer correct, so good for you. I'm not going to say who my sister is, or you guys are going to figure out that's the right answer and cheat. So, Heather, thanks for telling us about the trip you took. That's fascinating. A grizzly with a fish in his mouth. That's awesome. Toya, I also love the smoothies at Cowboy Coffee. I had serious withdrawal problems when they were closed. They are open and again serving smoothies, so I hope you get a chance to get to Jackson Hole and have another one of those. Oh, my mouth is drooling just thinking about it. Those smoothies, guys, if you're going to visit Jackson, you got to check them out right on the square. Oh, we have a request for some bobcat videos. We'll definitely see if we can't get you some bobcat footage. I will warn you, I don't see bobcats very often, and they're usually so quick I don't get a video, but I'll see if we can get you some stuff, Monique. The bobcats are a little easier in the winter, but we'll give it a try. It's a little bit like getting footage of a mountain lion. We have a request for updates on some of our local bears and a question about other animals and delayed implantation. So let me answer that first. So delayed implantation is something that other mammals do, but grizzly bears and bears, all bears practice delayed implantation, are by far and away the largest of all the mammals who practice this. So for those of you guys who missed the video earlier where Kelsey was talking about this, it's a really unbelievable situation. Bears breed in the spring and then they hold that fertilized egg in stasis until the very, very late fall, almost December, when they implant that fertilized egg into their uterus. And it's really, really fascinating. The number of eggs that are implanted, it's thought, are based on the condition, the hibernatory fat content that the bear has gained. So for $3.99 to have quadruplets would require her to have an enormous amount of hibernatory fat and be a very, very, very good bear in terms of her ability to get enough food before going into hibernation. Triplets are incredibly rare because of that idea. Now, that's the way I learned it in college. Delayed implantation is based on body condition. It's not like the bear wakes up and goes, oh, I think I'll have 2 cubs this year. They don't have any control over it necessarily. However, $3.99 has turned that whole idea on its head. It's always been thought that it's just solely body condition that determines how many cubs are going to be born in bears. But $3.99's consistent triplets, she keeps having these triplets and now has quadruplets, seems strongly suggestive that there's also a genetic element involved. Simply because there's no way that that one bear would be in that good of a body condition every single year to be continuously supporting so many rare multiples. It's so unusual in the animal world, particularly in grizzly bears, to have more than 2 cubs, that it seems like there must be something in her genetics that seems to make her more likely to have multiples. So delayed implantation and the number of cubs you have is probably, yes, partially part of body condition, and also partly probably a little bit of genetics. Not terribly well understood, little hard to study in the wild. Grizzlies aren't going to just hang out and let you figure that out. There have been some interesting studies that have been done as part of zoo research studies, but one of the more interesting things is that zoo bears very rarely hibernate. If you think of winter as a time of famine, a time of little food, rather than a time of cold, it'll actually make more sense as to why bears do hibernate. And I should pause here. I don't want to get too far in the weeds. They don't actually hibernate, they nestivate, but we'll call it hibernation for now, just to not get confusing. And when bears are preparing for hibernation, basically when the amount of intake they're getting is lower than the amount of calories they're consuming to forage, a hormone ticks on that makes them get very sleepy and makes them go into hibernation. That would require there to be a shortage of food in order for bears to hibernate. So for instance, some black bears in Florida and other southern environs, they don't hibernate. There's plenty of food year round and they don't need to do it. But this delayed implantation mechanism still exists within them. So, okay, I got on a tangent there. The question is, do other mammals practice delayed implantation? And the answer is yes, but most of them are in the rodent family. They're very small animals. They're very different than the physiology of a bear. And so it's pretty fascinating that the vast majority of this delayed implantation, which is a relatively rare reproduction technique, would be in that very small group of Rodentia. And then over here in the Ursus family, in the bear family, we've got it going on too. Evolutionarily, how that happened is a little bit of a mystery, but kind of a fun and interesting one to pursue. The other thing to kind of consider about delayed implantation is that from a medical perspective, it has enormous potential. If we can figure out how these bears are holding fertilized eggs in stasis for long periods of time, it would be incredibly helpful for folks in the fertility field to help folks who are hoping to have a baby but haven't been able to be successful. Right now, we will freeze sperm and we'll freeze ova, but we won't freeze fertilized eggs like that. If there's a way we can learn from how bears do that, it could help a lot of human families in their search to have their own offspring. So a pretty cool little thing about bears. I bet you most of you guys didn't know that they practice delayed implantation. So thanks very much for that question. That was a good one. Let's see what else we've got here. Due to the recent travel restrictions, are you seeing that wildlife investigates spaces that were previously more people spaces, and is there a concern they may have built some new habitats? Toby, that is a really, really good question. And I'll be honest with you, my hunch when we got back out into Grand Teton after it reopened was that that would be the case. Grand Teton and Yellowstone, we'd see birds nesting in areas that would be shortly full of people and wouldn't be a good place to nest, or animals denning in places they shouldn't be. And I was very surprised that we saw almost no examples of that. I think sort of for two reasons. First of all, humans may not have been in those areas, but our scent and our construction still was. And most mammals and most animals and birds tend to want to avoid nesting and building dens in places that are alien and unfamiliar to them. So we didn't actually see a lot of cases of that. I did see some offspring, some young animals who were a little startled in the first week with people. They didn't have a lot of experience with people, and we had to be a little careful. There was a sage grouse that I saw relatively early on with little chicks, and these little chicks had clearly never seen a car before and didn't have a clue what to do about it. I suspect very, very quickly these animals picked up that humans were once again in the environment and using these spaces, and there seems to be a good adaptation. Most animals are pretty adaptable in general, and so yeah, I was a little personally surprised. I expected to see more of that, but I didn't actually. Let's see. Oh, good point. Laura points out that weasels can also practice delayed implantation. Yeah, most of the weasel family actually can. I'm very sorry to have avoided the weasel family. I love weasels. Kind of quick fact, did you know we have more types of weasels here in Jackson Hole than anywhere else on the planet? We have 5 types of weasels here in Jackson Hole. I wonder who can name all the weasels. That's a weird trivia question. That might be a little hard for a gift card. But if you feel like you are up to the challenge, tell me in the comment section if you can name those. And keep in mind that some members of our weasel family don't seem like weasels. A little bit like people are surprised to hear beavers are rodents, right? Some of these are pretty big animals we're talking about. Colin asks, how many cubs is common? So Colin, typically with black bears, grizzly bears, sun bears, polar bears, all these different kinds of bears, 1 to 2 would be a pretty normal brood. It's pretty common to see young bears in their first pregnancy maybe only have 1 There are exceptions to that rule, but to see twins is certainly not a big surprise. We certainly will see that. Grizzly Bear 399's daughter, Grizzly Bear 610, currently has twins. Kind of an interesting side note on that, Grizzly Bear 610 actually adopted one of Grizzly Bear 399's cubs many years ago. 399 was wandering around with triplets. We don't know exactly what happened, but the next day she had twins and 610 had triplets. They kind of traded a cub. Typically the way that happens is there's some kind of an aggressive interaction. Both mothers send their cubs up into a tree, and then the cubs come down and the wrong cub goes with the wrong bear. That has happened in the past. In this case, it didn't really seem to be that was what was going on. Typically the mother who's missing the cub is pretty frantic and is trying to find that cub, and might even get it back from the bear that there was a confrontation with. 399 was very calm about this. She wasn't concerned that she was missing a cub, and she wasn't concerned that her daughter, 610, was in her territory, and wasn't concerned that her daughter had cubs, including her cub. So there's been a lot of debate amongst biologists in the bear world. Did 399 voluntarily give her cub to 610? Is she cognitively capable of making that decision? Was it an accident and then she accepted it and it moved on? Or did she just have no idea that this had happened and was so overwhelmed by having triplets that she just wasn't concerned that one of them was missing? We will never know because we're not going to be able to ask her. But kind of very famous event, not something we've really seen replicated, where this mother bear with cubs, either voluntarily or involuntarily, gave a cub to her daughter, her now grown daughter. So kind of a fun situation there. Let's see what else we've got here. Oh, good guesses on the weasels. Okay, long tail, short tail. Now remember, an ermine is also a short tail weasel. So the same thing. So long tail, short tail. So ermine's technically correct, but that's a short tail. So you've got two. Okay. Oh, very good. Pine marten. Very good. Wolverine. Okay, we've got one more. We've got 4 out of 5. Long-tail weasel, short-tail weasel, Wolverine. I don't want to give it away. Pine marten, sometimes called an American marten. Anybody got the last one? I'll give you guys a minute to think about it, and then I'll tell you. Let's see. Don says, no more mountain lions around Jackson like last fall. No, Don, we have not seen any sign of that mountain lion who was hanging around last fall. That's not unexpected. Typically when we have mountain lion sightings, they're pretty brief. The fact that one was a couple days was really pretty extraordinary. Actually pretty close to the EcoTour Adventures offices, believe it or not. So we all enjoyed that a lot. Colby, I like your answer. Mar, 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 mo, mo, mo. Okay, that's a hint for everybody who hasn't gotten the trivia question right. Some cheering for Verlin. That's fantastic. Oh, good guess on that. No, it's not a ferret. The last one I'm looking for is a river otter. Did you think that was a weasel? Crazy, right? You don't think of a river otter as a weasel. People have this bad opinion of weasels, and I'm not exactly sure why. Kind of like they have a bad opinion of rodents. And when I tell them that a muskrat or a beaver is a rodent, they go, oh, rodents aren't so bad. And when I tell them a river otter or a wolverine is a weasel, they go, oh, maybe weasels aren't so bad. So hopefully maybe I taught you some tolerance of some of these mammal groups that aren't as well loved and respected as the big bears and wolves and coyotes and such. So there you go. Toya is asking, are there black-footed ferrets in the area? And you're right, that is a weasel. We just don't, unfortunately, have them here. So black-footed ferrets were considered extinct, for those of you guys not familiar with that situation. And then a very small population of them was found in a remote ranch in eastern Wyoming. All of those ferrets were actually, the decision was made to take them into captivity because there were so few left of them. A big breeding program was created, and then those ferrets were re-released out into eastern Wyoming, the prairies and long grass habitat. That is their home. A black-footed ferret wouldn't be really comfortable in the mountainous terrain that we have here in Jackson Hole. Not really where they're native, at least that we're aware of. It wouldn't really be a good spot for them. So yes, it would be pretty spectacular if they lived here, right? Because then we'd have 6 members of the weasel family. But in fact, no, they're in eastern Wyoming. So thank you. That's really fun, Toya. Don says he had a boss who was a weasel, but that's another story. Don, I'd like to hear it someday. Come to Jackson Hole and tell us about it. Toya's asking about $3.99 and her kois, and Taylor, who's doing the comment section, is mentioning that she's actually out as we speak. She is out. I was actually out on a trip last night, and they had shut down the road for her. So $3.99 and her kois. What I mean by that is koi means cub of the year, newborn cubs. And so yes, $3.99 is putting on a very big show. I also got a great view of Blondie's subadult cubs last night. So Blondie is another very famous bear in Grand Teton National Park. She's actually my favorite. Those subadult cubs are still doing okay. For those of you guys that have been following us, they've been palling around together. They're newly on their own. Blondie, their mother, actually has a brand new koi, a brand new cub this year. And these guys who got kicked out last year, it's time to be an adult bear and be on your own, have decided to hang out together, which is unusual but not unheard of for some subadult bears. Unfortunately, one of them got into a little bit of a scuffle with a porcupine, and he's got quills all the way around his eye. There's actually been a lot of concern about that. I've spoken to a couple of local veterinarians in the area. I have a background as a veterinary technician as well as a wildlife biologist, and so I know porcupine quills are painful and problematic, but typically not deadly unless they involve the throat or sometimes the eye. And so I kind of wanted some opinions on that. I've got some good news, which is while this is likely not a comfortable situation for this bear, generally speaking, the infection he has is very survivable. You know, his eye's looking kind of infected. And that he should hopefully be able to survive his encounter with a porcupine. He may, however, lose the eye. What can happen is those quills can kind of burrow deeper towards the eye and can create ulcers on the eye, which, if the quills aren't removed, can create blindness in that eye. He'll still be able to use his other eye. Bears are incredible animals. Their primary sense of smell is their nose, and so they need their smell far more than they need their vision. He'll probably live a good life with just one eye. But it is unfortunate, of course, that he is having a hard time with those quills. I'm sure they're uncomfortable. As for the other bears, 610 with her 2 subadult cubs, or not quite subadult cubs, her 2.5-year-olds, I guess would be the way to put it, is doing fine, and those cubs are doing fine as well. We're expecting to see some movement between her and those cubs relatively soon, but we'll see when she kicks them loose. And then we've also had some questions about 399's subadult cubs, her now grown cubs. Of the cubs she had of the last batch, there is still one in Grand Teton National Park. That one has also been seen and seems to be doing fine as well. So of the sort of bears that have a certain celebrity status in the park, all of them are doing okay. I know some folks have been worried about the one with the porcupine quills, but so far so good. There's also been a lot of black bear activity that's been going on, including some courtship behaviors and some other things. We'll have more on that next week for you for sure. But for the bear update, everybody's doing pretty well. One of these days, I'm going to do a short on this program that talks a little bit about 399 and her lineage, so you guys can all keep this all straight and who has what ear tags and what color they are and all that. But in the meantime, 399, people just go crazy for her. She really is an incredible bear, and so it's good to see that she's doing so well at her August age, I guess. All right, I think think that's all the questions that we have this week. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure spending my Wednesday evening with you. Please do have a great week and a wild week if you can, and we'll see you next time. So long.